Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Lazy Entrepreneur. I'm your host Sam Priestley, and today I've got a bonus special episode with you. We have Oscar Ford here from Anuncia, which is a UK-based pay-per-click specialist agency. Is that right? How would you describe your business?
Yeah, so thanks Sam, thanks for having me. So Anuncia is a UK-based pay-per-click specialist agency. So we work with businesses and charities in the UK primarily. So for businesses, we work with across various industries, but helping them to drive leads and sales from ads on Google primarily. And for charities, we help them leverage the Google Ad Grant, which is essentially Google gives charities free money.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so it's not particularly well known, as in there isn't a huge amount of uptake of it, which is a shame. So Google offers registered UK charities and charities and non-profits in, I think it's 52 countries across the world, up to $120,000 a year in free Google advertising on search. So it's a massively leveraged marketing opportunity, and it's a bit fiddly to get set up, but there's a huge amount of value waiting there for charities. So we essentially help set up and manage campaigns and basically drive the kinds of objectives that a charity wants, whether that's website sign-ups, awareness, engagement in some way, getting volunteers, that sort of thing.
Awesome. And when did you set up the business?
So it's been running as a business for about 4 years, but I freelanced for a fair amount of time, and then it's formed into an agency in the past probably 18 months.
Nice.
So yeah, it's been a steep learning curve, kind of moving from freelance to agency and employer.
Yeah. Well, I thought it'd be really good to get you on. Actually, I'll tell everyone what we've been doing. So this morning, Oscar has been helping me with my pay-per-click we were looking at my table tennis business, Eastfield and Palio, and also talking a bit about Pipehouse Gin. Pay-per-click is something I've tried many times and never had any success with. And as Oscar saw when he looked at my campaigns, there was a lot wrong with it. A lot of quick wins, which are easy for me. A lot of stuff that's going to take me a lot more time to really work out. And I thought it'd be good to actually, chat to you, and hopefully you can give us a bit of an overview of how pay-per-click marketing works and how it can be useful for our businesses.
Sure. Yeah. So as with any digital marketing kind of strategy, it's ranges from sort of simple to really, really specialist and complicated. And so, here we'll keep it quite top level at an overview. And then I think the kind of more specialist stuff comes in later on. So, we were looking at campaigns and trying to go through some of the basics and foundational stuff. So we should probably start with explaining what PPC actually is. PPC stands for pay-per-click and is to some extent these days a kind of shorthand for lots of things within it. So the main platforms we're talking about is Google, Bing, which is Microsoft search engine, Amazon and Facebook and Instagram. And pay-per-click literally means the advertiser pays when a user clicks on their ad or engages with their ad. So Google is the daddy in terms of search. And when I say Google, it's a group of advertising options. So search is the one they started with, which is if you're looking for a local business or a particular product, you'll type it into the search engine. You see lots of results. The top ones are ads. The ones at the bottom of the page are ads as well. They have a little green icon that says they're an ad, but Google keeps trying to make that as subtle as possible to make you click more. So that's search advertising. So you as an advertiser can set up an account with Google Ads. You enter your billing information, set up an account, and you can decide when somebody searches coffee shop in London, you want your ad to appear, and then you enter the auction for that. They do shopping, which is if you search for a product on Google and you see the little product tiles that appear in the search results, that's Google Shopping. A similar thing, it's an auction. Advertisers create a product feed and advertise there. And then display, which is the banner ads that you see when you're browsing the web. So the most common example of this is if you've been on a e-commerce website, let's say you're looking for new shoes, and then you don't buy anything and you start going to other websites and you keep seeing the shoes popping up everywhere you go. That's an example of display advertising.
Awesome. So just to summarise quickly, we've kind of got a few different big companies who offer pay-per-click advertising, where you as a business will pay to appear either on people's search terms or on websites or on social media. The big ones are Google, who also own YouTube, and they're the ones who, when you search anything on Google, the top few links are often adverts. They also own a lot of ad space on other people's random websites, and those are the ones that everyone gets a bit scared about, where you're being followed around the internet by adverts. And then we've got kind of the social media group. We've got Facebook, Instagram, places like that, which are slightly different, and Amazon, which is a shopping platform. So a bunch of different things, but your specialty really is Google, and in particular that first lot. So not so much YouTube, but the search engine, so appearing on top of the search term, as well as the display ads following around, and also the shopping, which is the other one you mentioned, which is that tab in Google that says shopping, and is also where you see products appear with a price next to it.
Yeah, that's right. So in this day and age, the platforms develop very quickly and all very differently. So actually, it's quite difficult to be a master of all of them. I think if you, as one person, it takes a long time to build that kind of mastery over one platform. So we try and concentrate just on the ones we really understand.
So do you think it's the right thing for someone like me who's got a few different small businesses that don't necessarily have a huge turnover, that I should start practicing just a bit of pay-per-click for myself? Or should I not do any pay-per-click at all? Should I focus on other marketing? Or should I hire an expert?
So I've got a few thoughts on this. I think the first one ties into marketing more generally. For any marketing, in my mind, it gets very difficult if you stretch yourself across multiple platforms all at the same time. When you do that, it makes it really difficult to measure the results and adjust, because you're too stretched. You're thinking about too many things at once. So I would recommend, if you're going to do pay-per-click, do it as one, either solely that and concentrate on it, or as one of a small number of marketing things that you're working on at one time, so that you can really focus on it. I think it's very important to have a basic understanding of how it works. One, understand what's going on and allow you to make changes, but also find the right kind of people.
Cool. So I've decided now I want to do some pay-per-click advertising for my business. Let's talk a bit about where I should start. So we've kind of got a few different Google dashboards, like different things that all need to work together for this to work. So I need to have a website that has some sort of analytics on it, Google Analytics, which is a website in itself. So to set that up, I assume I just sign up to Google Analytics and then I input some code into my WordPress website or something. I think that's quite straightforward to do. Then I also need a Google Adverts account, which is free to sign up.
Yeah.
And then those lot need to link together.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So going back to that kind of foundation, and the data is so critical. So exactly as you described, you would set up Google Analytics, put that onto the website, Google Ads, put the code onto the website for conversion tracking perhaps, and then you would link Analytics and Google Ads. You would also want to set up Search Console, which is another Google free product. Search Console will give you essentially organic data, so how your SEO is doing, broadly speaking. Again, you can link that to Analytics. So once you've done all of that, you've now got a really solid base in Google Analytics to see everything that's happening on the website. The next stage from that is within Analytics, you can create both goals, events, and audiences, so all three of them. With audiences, that's essentially creating buckets of users based on certain criteria. So Google has loads of options for doing that. You could say people who've viewed a certain page, people who've spent a certain amount of time on the website, people who've visited, people who didn't buy, that kind of thing. You can set up events. So if somebody adds a product to the basket, that can trigger an event in Analytics. If someone buys, that should feed through that there's been a sale and the value of the sale into Analytics. So you can see, okay, Google Organic drove £2,000 in sales this month. Google CPC, which is the pay-per-click ads campaign, for example, drove £200, and you can use all of that data to optimize everything that you're doing across all digital channels. So that is kind of gives you a really solid foundation to build on the website side.
So if I have my Google Ads account and I'm running, say, a search campaign, which is targeting keywords, and I'm basically bidding a set amount that I'm willing to pay per click for each person. And then when that appears in Google, someone clicks on me, and then with the analytics side, I can then track what they do on my website. So we can then look back and see how much money we've earned from this search campaign for analytics. So we could say over the course of a week, we spent £100 on search engine advertising, and that has led to £200 of sales. And then because I know the margin of how much I make per product, I can then backtrack and see whether it's worth doing.
Yeah, so that is a crucial thing to get your head around if you're looking to do this kind of marketing. And really it will support all of your marketing, both online and offline, is having a solid grasp of those kind of numbers. So number one is making sure that they track through properly. So I'll be seeing all of the information on how much we're spending and where sales are coming from, and figuring out how to plug any gaps. So as an example, if you're in, say, a lead generation business, the main ways for lead generation businesses for tracking, say, inquiries tends to be either someone submitting a form on the website or someone ringing them up. Let's say you've got your form tracking enabled on the website, but you don't have your call tracking in place. It's now very difficult to figure out where the phone calls have been coming from across your marketing activity. And there's software you can use to track that, but it's just worth thinking about how you join up that data so you can make those decisions. So there are two key metrics for any business, but it's easier to work out for e-commerce, which is your cost per acquisition and your target cost per acquisition, and then your return on ad spend, which is sometimes shortened to ROAS. If your product, say, is £30 and you can spend up to £10 to acquire that sale, then your target CPA is £10. You can at maximum spend £10 to get a £30 sale and make money. So you've now got a CPA that you can aim for. The the ROAS is basically the multiple of revenue to cost that to make it, profitable for you as well. So they work together, but a £30 revenue on £10 spend is a 300% return on ad spend, ROAS, or 3 times it's sometimes called. So those two metrics are your critical ones. So if you can get a good foundation for those, then right, well, if our ad budget is £2,000, we know we need to make £6,000 in revenue to make a 3 times return on ad spend. That's the minimum we need to make, as an example.
And so then the challenge is that we're paying for cost per click, which is people arriving at the website. We're not paying every time someone purchases a product. So we've got to do this balancing act of trying to work out how much we can legitimately spend on clicks, which then translates to a profitable campaign. Yeah,
that's exactly it. So going back to something you mentioned earlier, which is PPC right for me? I think, have you got a handle on the numbers that we just talked about, and is the data tracking through properly online? If it's a yes to both of those, then it comes down to what are you able to spend on the campaign and for how long. In my experience, pay-per-click tends to be very difficult if you have quite a limited budget. Deciding what budget you need comes back to those metrics we just talked about. So Google offers a free keyword tool, which is called Google Keyword Planner. So if you sign up for a free Google Ads account, you can access Keyword Planner within the account. You can use Keyword Planner to find how many people are searching for particular queries, and broadly speaking, how much Google thinks you'd need to pay to get clicks for that keyword. So let's say that we've looked up gin, and craft gin, for example, gets 200 clicks a month, and Google reckons it's £1 a click to appear sort of on the first page for search. So that kind of gives us a basic foundation. You can decide based on those metrics by extrapolating that out. So you could say, right, well, if it's £1 a click and we can get 100 clicks, we'll spend £100. What's our conversion rate on the website? If that's 1%, then we'll get one sale for 100 clicks. So we spent £100 for one sale. And that one sale, what's your average order value? If it's 30 quid, you're going to have spent £100 on ads and made £30 on sales. So that's a useful exercise for figuring out how many clicks are we likely to get for this budget that we can spend. On that, the first few months of a pay-per-click campaign are a period of testing, if you haven't done it before. Let's say there are 50 very relevant keywords. There may only be 10 or 15 which are going to be reliably driving a good return on investment for you as a business, and some of the other ones just might not work. So you have to have enough time and budget to actually test those, pause off the ones that don't perform, and then you can go back and essentially get a reliable, consistent campaign from the ones that you've found to win.
So to start, we need to spend a bit of money on a really broad range of keywords in order to work out what the real cost per click of each one is, and then how that translates to actually sales. Because keywords aren't created equal. One keyword might have a better conversion rate to actual sales, even if it has a higher cost per click, and might actually be worth it, whereas a different keyword might be really cheap to buy, but might not turn into any sales at all.
Yeah. And
that is kind of the challenge then, really, with Google pay-per-click, is finding the keywords, finding how much you should spend on it, and basically creating these little, I suppose they're money machines, aren't they? That you put money on one side into advertising. It's very data driven, so you know exactly how much you're going to make at the end, and yeah, you get sales out the back that you know is going to make a profit. Yeah, that's exactly it. Excuse me. And I think just to go back to kind of pay-per-clicks pros and cons to some extent, one of the benefits of pay-per-click advertising is the kind of feedback loop is quite short. So you can turn it on today and it will start spending today and start driving traffic to your website. So if you want to test some of these core metrics, so you know, how well does this page convert? Will people actually engage and contact us, and etc. Pay-per-click is a good way to drive that initial momentum, because if you think about something like SEO, you might write a huge chunky guide. It takes you ages to write, and then it might not rank for a long time. So the feedback loop is there, but the downside is you have to spend money to do it. So that's always the challenge, is you do have to be prepared to spend a bit of money and be kind of patient with the results whilst also actively managing it. Yeah, I think that's one of the areas where I mess up, is that I'll start experimenting, then I'll get a bit bored and won't come back to it. So I'll keep doing these little tests and then not actually ever do the optimization side at the end. For a business like mine, Pipehouse Gin, say, how much should I be spending? Pipehouse Gin, how much should I spend on my first pay-per-click campaign? Bear in mind, I know nothing. This is going to be a lot of trial and error from me. So yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think based on the context of that business, I think the website is good. There's probably some work to be done on making sure the right sort of actions are being tracked properly and everything is set up, because you don't want to start spending money and find, oh, right, we're not tracking that thing, or that's broken or whatever. Once that's done, I'd say it's a reasonably competitive space, but you want to start small and then kind of scale up. So I would suggest, really, for that industry, we're talking probably 80p a click upwards, perhaps. So a good few £100 a month I would allocate to testing that. And I would look at it over a 3-month span. So I'd say, right, we're going to run ads for 3 months, and to some extent set yourself a budget per month. I think the budget should be a function of how much the clicks are. So if you're in, if you're looking for kind of broadband comparison where the clicks are 25 quid a click, then your budget is going to need to be huge to test that. But realistically, you're thinking about it, okay, I probably need to drive a good few hundred clicks a month to the website to see some sales coming in based on historic conversion rates. So we are talking in the hundreds of pounds, I think, for most examples of
of industries that we're looking at.
So £300 a month, roughly, over 3 months, £600, maybe a little bit more, £700-800 for the testing phase.
I think so, yeah. I think you should get a good feel for the key metrics on that. It's very hard to predict how it will work out in terms of ROI as a campaign. So I think for that phase, you should kind of set the things that you're trying to learn from it as much as the actual return at that early phase. It's different if you're kind of very established with that marketing channel later on.
So with my budget of, let's stick with the pipe budget. So with my budget of £1,000, how should I split that in my initial campaigns? So we've talked about search, display and shopping.
So I would split most of that into shopping and some search. So slightly weight towards shopping against search with a little bit of display. So remarketing, unless you're getting loads of visitors to the website, a remarketing campaign by its nature will be fairly small because you're trying to re-engage a subset of users to the website. So remarketing campaigns should spend, tens of pounds, hundreds of pounds if there's loads of volume. I think in this example, we're talking tens of pounds a month, but very targeted and should convert better than cold traffic. For search and shopping, I think I would probably start with a small number of maybe broad and phrase keywords on search. So, you went back to that example of craft gin, some sort of buyer intent stuff like buy craft gin or buy gin. Those are quite broad, so you wouldn't want too many of those because they'll probably spend quite hard as individual keywords. So for the broad ones, keep it quite tight grouping. So talking maybe a dozen sorts of keywords to look at one time. And then there's the sort of standard best practice for the last few years has been to do something called single keyword ad groups or SKAGs. That is where you look at your search query report. So what search queries people actually typed in and where they converted, and you take your best performers and put them in individual sort of one keyword per ad group so you can have maximum control over those. That logic is starting to change as Google's adding in more automation and trying to do less query driven search, but that is still a reasonably good strategy to begin with. So I'd say probably focus on getting a product feed working for the shopping campaign first, and that should drive a good amount of spend. Do some search for some target keywords and then a small amount of display remarketing.
So when you sign up to Google Ads, you have the choice to do a broad keyword campaign, which your example here was buy craft gin. That doesn't mean you only appear for search terms that say exactly buy craft gin. It means that Google will kind of create other keywords around it that are to do with that phrase. So it could be, where could I buy craft gin? Or it could be purchase craft gin. Or it could be buy artisan gin. Or it will create a whole load of other random keywords which it thinks are kind of linked to the phrase you've chosen, that broad phrase, buy craft gin. And then what you're saying then is that after a month or two, we can look at all these random phrases that it's picked up and we can work out which ones are doing well. And then we can create a specific campaign just for that, where we have a lot more control over how much we're spending on the advertising. Yeah,
that's exactly it. So Google on search has 3 match types of keywords. So what you've just described is broad match. It can be very broad sometimes. So some more the examples you gave they are broad, but they're still quite sort of tightly focused. You can sometimes get things like wholesale or keywords that are search queries that really aren't that relevant. And so looking at your search query report is important because you'll find if you're running a broad campaign, there'll be lots of things that you need to add as negative keywords. Phrase match is a slightly tighter targeting method. So you might have craft gin on phrase, means that craft gin in that order has to appear within the search query string that the user types. And then exact match, so craft gin on exact match means you only want your ad to appear when someone types in craft gin exactly or very close variants. It's worth saying that Google has periodically kind of loosened the targeting on each type. So exact match isn't that exact anymore, but it's still the tightest targeting you can get. So you'd start with broad, you then find queries that aren't relevant and add those as negatives, and then you find ones that do quite well and maybe move those to exact match to optimize for. Just to touch on shopping, the way that works is different to search. So for shopping, Google's algorithms will choose the keywords for you. So you produce a product feed based on your website data, and you add your product title and description, you make those content rich, keyword rich, good essentially for SEO, and then Google will go away and decide what kind of searches to show it for. You can still add negative keywords, but basically Google does all the keyword discovery for you, I suppose.
Cool. All right, so let's take a step back and see if I can summarize what you've just said. So I've got a brand new business, Pipehouse Gin. We're young and keen, and we want to get some online sales for our gin business. So the first thing we do is we go to our website, which, as you said, is awesome. Everyone should check it out at pipehousegin.com. And we make sure that it's set up correctly with tracking and analytics through Google Analytics. And what we can do with Google Analytics is we can get it to track whenever we have a sale. So when someone arrives at the website and they go through and they purchase a bottle of gin, they pay for it, that will then track in Google Analytics. And then what we can do is we can sign up to a Google Ads account. Is that what it's called? Just Google Ads?
Yeah, Google Ads. It used to be Google AdWords and they rebranded to Google Ads.
Cool. So Google Ads, which we can then link to our Google Analytics thing, and we can start setting up our first campaign. So for our first campaign, we're going to target UK craft gin, basically. Very simple.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to create a few keywords around craft gin that we found on the Google Keyword Planner. So for instance, buy craft gin, and we're going to select a broad phrase for that. And we're going to just set it running. We're going to give it a budget. We're going to say we're going to spend a max of £300 a month. Do you do a daily budget or just a monthly? How's it work?
So that's a good question. So Google works on a daily budget. So basically set your monthly budget and then put it on a per day rate. Google's actual spend may vary slightly. They sometimes go slightly over, but over a month they shouldn't exceed by, I think it's 20%. They won't go beyond that as a total spend.
So I set it off at £10 a day. And then what will happen is on my Google Ads dashboard, it will tell me how many clicks I'm getting, how much that's costing me both for the total amount and on a per click basis. And then because it's linked with my very good analytics tracking, it will also tell me how many of those clicks converted to sales, and so how many sales we got. So I might log in on day 3 and it said I've had 200 clicks, which has cost £150, say, and that has generated £200 worth of sales. Yeah,
that's exactly it. So you can have you customize the columns, so it would tell you the total number of sales. So let's say it's 20 sales, the what's called conversion value, so that would be the 150, and then all conversion value over cost, which is pretty much return on ad spend, which is the metric I talked about before.
And so then each day or every few days, I'm going to log in and I'm going to see what the exact keywords that I'm appearing for. Because remember, I selected broad, which means it's going to kind of make up keywords which it thinks are kind of to do with craft gin. So an example of this going wrong, which I've had before with table tennis, is I put in table tennis to appear and it starts making me appear for tennis bats. Tennis bats and table tennis bats are completely different things, but Google doesn't know that. So what I can do is if I see myself appearing for inappropriate keywords, I can add that to what we call the negative keyword list, which means that I just won't appear for that anymore. So I keep doing this over the course of, did you say 3 months?
Yeah.
For this?
Mm-hmm.
When should I start creating my more specific campaigns?
So I'd base that on data primarily. So you really want to see some click volume so that you've got less variance. So, if something's got 2 clicks, it's not enough to make a decision on whether it's actually reliably a good keyword. It might just be it got a sale by some kind of fluke. So I'm talking probably dozens of clicks before you're making decisions, upwards of that.
And a bit of common sense as well, because I'm sure there is a bit of luck involved that if I've appeared on a term for, I don't know, non-alcoholic gin and I happen to get a sale, that probably doesn't mean I should be targeting non-alcoholic gin with my alcoholic gin. Yeah,
that's exactly it. So common sense combined with, to some extent, search volume and, click volume, and then you can say, okay, that looks like a runner. Let's put it on exact and really focus on optimizing that.
So once I've come across a keyword that I really like and is doing well, I then create a new campaign with that phrase on exact, which means it's only going to appear in search terms when people search that exact phrase. And for that, then I can be a lot more specific with the cost per click I'm willing to do.
The single keyword ad group theory is that you would create an exact match campaign, because I like to group campaigns by match type. So you'd have an exact match campaign, and within that is different ad groups for your single keywords that you think are good. So one ad group per keyword, so one keyword per ad group. And then that gives you the maximum control to optimize the ad copy and bid pricing and campaign budget and that kind of thing.
And I suppose the one extra thing to add is that I then need to add that keyword that I've chosen as a negative keyword on the broad campaign that I was doing before, just so they don't compete with each other.
Yeah, exactly. So by moving it to an exact match campaign, the idea is that you want to have more control over that on its own. And so you don't, when that query triggers your ads in Google, you want Google to show the ad from your exact match campaign, not your broad match. So that's how you do it with the negatives.
Then if I were to do a Google shopping campaign, that's a little bit different. I need a feed of my products on my website that goes into Google. There's actually another website, Google Merchant Services. Is that right?
Merchant Center, yeah.
Merchant Center, which is then linked to the Google Ads. And then they kind of make up keywords for me, but I can add negative ones in retrospect.
Yeah.
Get sales on that.
Exactly. So Google Shopping is very feed driven. So if you can make sure that your product feed is as good as it can be, you're far more likely to have a successful shopping campaign. And then the other bit is obviously the little tweaks on negatives and everything else. There are, depending on the website you have, there are lots of plugins that can create a feed for you from the website. So, the standard platforms like Shopify, WooCommerce, etc. have plugins that can do that. The other option, if you have a small number of products and you don't want to integrate a fiddly plugin, or you don't want to pay for one, you can use Google's template in Google Sheets.
That seems to be a common theme here, where everything's a little bit fiddly, takes a little bit of time to get working. There's a lot of coming in and tweaking little things until you get it working. Yeah,
exactly. I think this ties into the sort of pros and cons of the strategy, I suppose, is because it is quite fast. It does need that constant little tweaks and touches here and there. The kind of fiddliness, it seems to be a feature of a lot of these platforms. Despite being huge companies, they are kind of complex, fiddly platforms. But it is worth persevering with, I think, even to get to grips with the basics so you fully understand it. And it's very useful long term.
My kind of finalish question, which you might not be able to answer, but is what is the chance of this actually working out for my business? What's the chance of me creating all these campaigns and then discovering that there are no keywords where the cost per click is worth it for me and the competition is just too strong?
Yeah, that's a really difficult question. So I think going back to the kind of agency space, the reason why a kind of, I suppose, almost like bread and butter agency client is a business that has got plenty of data in an account. They've run ads for a period of time. They get a certain level of return, but they want to see it improved. That's great, because as a specialist, you can go in and say, well, I've got loads of concrete data to base it on. I know what the current ROI is and everything else. I know the CPAs, all of that. With X, Y, and Z tweaks, I can take it from here to here. With a brand new account, there's tons of assumptions across the whole chain that you have to establish. So it could fall down at any one stage, which is why it's a moving target. So you might find, okay, we're assuming a conversion rate on the website of this. You get started with paid ads and they come in a certain cost per click, which works, but your conversion rate on the website is really poor. You find actually our landing pages just aren't up to scratch. Now you need to go back and test some different landing pages. So all of this is happening together, that you're trying to get all those parts working together. Worst case, I think, if you've got the budget and you look at it as a testing exercise initially, worst case, you learn which elements need work and then you can go back and tweak and revisit it. I mean, there are many businesses who get Google Ads working for them. You know, I've seen many campaigns that drive a positive ROI for the business and it leads to, you know, meaningful growth for them overall. In terms of the numbers who fail, you don't really hear about that because I'm sure lots of people try and it just doesn't work out. So yeah, very hard to say, but definitely worth trying because you will learn something if you do it in that structured way.
I suppose that's an argument for giving it a go myself, that I can run it for 3 months. Maybe I can't work it out, but I can say that actually I'm losing about £1 per sale, which isn't good enough for me. But then I could say sign up to a free consultation with a pay-per-click agency, show them all my data, and they can probably look at that quite quickly and say, yeah, there's stuff we can do here to improve it, or no, you've pushed it as far as it can get, it's not going to work out. Yeah,
definitely. And actually, to some extent, getting to a point where either way is useful as a business, because if you determine, okay, this doesn't work for us, it may never work for us, or it just might not be right at the moment, at least you can then shift your attention to a different marketing strategy. And, you know, as we discussed before with Pipehouse, for example, even some of the kind of not very sexy things of almost like knocking on doors, if it's effective, then you should do more of that. So it's kind of, there are so many options in terms of marketing strategies out there. And to some extent, it's a case of finding the handful that drive the vast majority of results for you as a business.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've got another podcast episode on the different types of marketing, which I think we cover 10 different types of marketing, of which pay-per-click is one of them. My kind of advice is give each one of them a go. Spend a bit of time, focus on each one. The ones that work, double down on until it no longer works, and then move on to the next one. I think that's probably the true with pay-per-click.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And just to touch on a topic which I think would be useful as well is, so we've talked about kind of the importance of maybe getting the fundamentals right, having a go yourself and having a play around with it, even on a small budget, just so you understand it. And then coming round to, let's say you've got to a point where you want to kind of scale it and look for specialist support. I think it's useful to just kind of cover briefly what to look for, I suppose, because we were talking about earlier that the freelancer and agency landscape is very busy and they all look and sound the same. So figuring out who is the real deal and who isn't is challenging. And so I think one thing to think about is referrals are important. So, you know, if you ask around and find somebody who's got had a good relationship, and for pay-per-click, a long-term relationship is sort of 6 months plus, you know, that's when, if they're still with that person and they can say that they're getting good results and they actually have the metrics to back it up, then that suggests that the people they're working with are doing a good job and it's worth exploring that with them. I'd also look specifically around what they talk about and the relationship. So if you speak to them and meet them, one, do you get on with them? Do you like their kind of mindset? But also, are they asking you about the business objectives and those metrics around ROI and, you know, how essentially they're going to justify however they're costing, you know, however they're charging you? Are they factoring that into the results they're trying to drive you? Because fundamentally, those people have to pay for their own services for it to be worthwhile long term. Otherwise, it's pointless. So those, I think, would be some of the things to look for. And that kind of applies to any digital marketing partners that you work with, is those are the key, I guess, facets of the thing that you want to look at.
So how do pay-per-click specialists charge? Is it based on turnover? Is it just a set fee?
Yeah, so there's a few different models. The most popular one these days is a project cost. So broadly speaking, there are kind of three different schools of thought on this. One is time and materials, so you charge based on hours spent and other materials. Two is a kind of fixed project cost, which generally is based on some kind of time and materials estimate that the agency or freelancer will make. And then the third is kind of results driven. So that could be a percentage of spend or a percentage of sort of earnings or uplift or some kind of combination. The industry has moved a lot away from time and materials. Most of it now is in fixed project costs. There is starting to be a move towards more results driven. That's one way that a partner can distinguish themselves from the pack, and so more, but because they take on more risk, and there's more specialists who are looking at how they can do that, or at least factor it into their pricing model. So yeah, I mean, my recommendation as well is to some extent shop around, get a few quotes from different people so that you've got a few different ideas and see. Most of them will probably be a project cost because there's quite a lot of time involved with making those changes every day and ensuring everything's working. But, get a feel for what the market is in your area, because locally prices will be very different as well. For example, London versus the Midlands or Manchester or somewhere else, the price will vary.
I suppose the key point is that it needs to factor into your calculations as to whether you're going to make any money. Because it's all well and good spending £1,000 a month on ad spend, but if I then have to spend another £1,000 on a PPC specialist, suddenly it's going to be a lot harder to make any money.
Yeah, 100%. So when the metric we talked about earlier of return on ad spend, there's return on investment and there's return on ad spend. So what you want to work out is what your return on ad spend needs to be when you factor in that agency cost.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Oscar. So if any of our listeners are a charity, you've never heard of this free charity grant that Google offer, and they want their 120 grand a year of free ad spend, how should they get in touch with you?
So they can email me on oscar@anuncia.co.uk. So that's ANUNCIA. And I like chatting to kind of charities and businesses, so feel free to get in touch if you fancy a chat or have further questions, and we can hopefully give you some answers.
Awesome. I suppose to add, you don't just focus on the charity sector. I mean, that is your focus, but you take clients from other areas as well.
Yeah, exactly. If the fit's right, we do. But yeah, I mean, it's great to be able to talk about some of this stuff, and so thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And goodbye.